Good morning, dear Minister, Madam. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and speak on tourism in the Mediterranean. Let's start by taking a look at overall tourism in the world. Some of the figures have already been mentioned here. Tourism responds to almost 10% of the direct, indirect, and induced GDP in the world, to $1.5 trillion in exports. This means 6% of the world's exports of goods and services, and 30% of the exports of services. It's the biggest item of exports in services in the world. And most importantly, tourism generates 1 out of 11 jobs in the world. So tourism is about economic growth, is about trade, is about, most importantly, generation of jobs. When we compare tourism with other export categories, tourism ranks as number 3, number 4, close to food products and to automotive products after fuels and chemicals. So it's really a very important, relevant item in world trade. Last year, 2015, we had 1,184 international arrivals, international tourist arrivals, close to 1.2 billion international tourism arrivals, besides the more than 6 billion domestic trips that we estimate that took place around the world. So our estimates, UNWTO estimates for 2020 is that the figure of 1.2 billion arrivals will reach 1.4 billion international arrivals, and by 2030, 1.8 billion international arrivals. A very interesting and important feature that has come out in the last few years, the fact that China has become the #1 outbound market. It took place in 2012. Chinese residents are traveling more and more, spending more and more abroad. In the year of 2015, they spent almost twice as much as US residents abroad. So this is a very important market for destinations around the world to look at. Now, other important source markets are very close to the Mediterranean or are part of the Mediterranean. Germany, the UK, and France, they are part of the top source markets. So when we look at tourism in the Mediterranean, some of the features have been presented here, but last year we had, or 2014, there were 342 million international tourist arrivals, 81% of them coming from Europe. And this market generated 247 billion euros in export earnings, not only what tourists spent in the countries they visited, but also on transport, on the transport of those tourists. This meant 12% of total exports of the Mediterranean countries. And we expect that in the years to come, from now to 2030, there will be 10 million new arrivals per year in average to the Mediterranean countries. Of course, these international arrivals are not evenly distributed between advanced European countries or emerging European countries and North Africa and Middle East. The distribution is approximately 70% to advanced European countries, 20% to emerging European countries, and 10% to the Middle East and North African countries. So clearly there is a great imbalance there to be addressed in the future in terms of arrivals. Now, in terms of the total exports, as we mentioned here that 12% of total exports of Mediterranean countries come from tourism, but tourism is responsible for 24% of the exports of the Middle East, 19% of the exports of the emerging European destinations, and 11% of the exports of the advanced European destinations, and 9% of the exports of Mediterranean African countries. So anyway, they are above the international average, which is 6%. And very importantly, tourism generates 115 billion euros of surplus in the travel balance in these 29 Mediterranean countries. Only 4 of the 29 do not have a surplus in their travel balance. So I have here a few points to indicate how we see that the Mediterranean can move forward in terms of tourism. I would like to say that in terms of opportunities, there is a strong tradition and professionalism in the sector that can still be built upon. Developed infrastructure in countries. Of course, the reverse is that there are opportunities in investment in many other countries and the need in many other countries to develop infrastructure. There is a diversity, natural and cultural diversity in the area. So the region is close to very important source markets, and some of the countries of the Mediterranean are indeed very important source markets. There is increasing regional cooperation, and this has been mentioned here before, the need for that cooperation, but not only between governments, but the sharing experience of the private sector that is in the region, and beyond the sharing experience, the development of public and private partnerships. The Med has a strong image and destination branding that captures the imagination of people from the region and beyond. And there is an opportunity to position the region as a leading green destination. To that, I would like to add that in terms of opportunities, their tourism presents to the countries of the region and around the world lots of opportunities for women. It's really, tourism is a very important instrument for gender empowerment, for opportunities for the youth, for jobs for the youth, and for SMEs development. In fact, the tourism has very low technical and capital barriers for entrepreneurship. So